how the hell did we go from this to this? That's what we're gonna find out. Have you ever noticed that each time the world slips into chaos, our humor changes? Come join me as we trace comedy's evolution from the 90s all the way to now. At the end, we'll finish up with some memes. I think it's a fun way to wrap up why absurdist humor is everywhere today. Who remembers the 1990s? Flannel was in, baggy jeans, and whatever the hell these were. Madonna, the Backstreet Boys, Nirvana, Tupac, GeoCities, MIRC, Seinfeld, Friends, rollerblading, yo-yos, and Tamagotchis. The 1990s. Its humor was mostly observational.
What's the deal with airplane food?
The minor inconveniences of everyday life. Stand-ups like Jerry Seinfeld, Brian Regan, Ellen DeGeneres, they all built their acts around the daily grind. And that's because the world felt stable enough that we could afford to obsess over the little things. It's a simpler time. Like, don't get me wrong, edgier political comedy was coming up, but it wasn't quite mainstream yet. Stand-ups like Chris Rock and later Dave Chappelle were beginning to bring race and politics into the spotlight, but it was still considered to be rebellious compared to the light-hearted observational comedy that was dominating primetime TV. Life was peachy, and it felt like it would never end. And then we had a big ol' oopsie-whoopsie. There's something about watching planes crash into buildings, fears of anthrax being sent in the post, and two bloody wars, led by a president that could barely string a sentence together. Hardly surprising that the very fabric of comedy would begin to erode. The goalposts of humor shifted towards much more fun and light-hearted things. Like war, insecurity, and paranoia.
Brian, are you suggesting that 9/11 didn't change everything?
What? No, I was just...
Because 9/11 changed everything, Brian. 9/11 changed everything.
You couldn't turn on TV without sitting through a Bush joke. Or 10 of them. And they weren't just one-off gags either. These were recurring segments.
The challenge facing the United States is that we have to be right one time. 100% of the time.
What used to feel edgy just felt normal, expected. Cynicism about leaders, wars, and institutions had broken out of the underground and was now in everyone's living rooms. Shows like Always Sunny, while they were less on the nose, they definitely took the piss out of wealth, corruption, and American power structures. And this was a global phenomenon. Like Brass Eye in the UK was already setting the template for satirical piss takes of moral panics.
In Holland, they've halved the crime rate by legalizing murder with the introduction of slaughter cafes.
Sacha Baron Cohen, he was mocking social anxieties under the guise of Ali G, Borat, and Bruno. And all the way over in Australia.
It's not like you can just pick a terrorist just by the way they look or by the sound of their name.
Well, not unless their name was something as blatant as, say, Terry Wrist or Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, which just happens to be the names we used to book some domestic tickets this week.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the final boarding call for Miss Mia Call, Paul Franklin, Al-Qaeda.
The world looked bleak as hell. But for a brief moment, the whole world almost felt unified. At least in our sense of humor. Like, it felt like we were all in on the same joke. I don't think there's any movie on the planet that captured the spirit of this era more than this movie did.
What you're saying is that you want us to put water on the crops.
Yes.
Water. Like out the toilet?
Well, it doesn't have to be out of the toilet, but yeah, that's the idea. But Brondo's got what plants crave.
It's got electrolytes.
Obviously, it wasn't all just politics, though. Frat pack comedies were churning out classic format punchlines every 10 seconds. A sort of oasis away from all the political commentary. As we all know, though, this breed of comedy was a ticking time bomb about to explode. Another little oopsie-whoopsie. The global financial crisis hit, and millennials graduated into the worst job market in decades. Society was on the cusp of yet another full-blown shift. Meritocracy. The whole work hard, get rewarded myth had started to crumble. People began to wake up to the reality that the daily grind didn't mean shit when banks responsible weren't only excused of liability, they were rewarded for destroying the fucking economy. And guess who got the raw end of the deal?
are freaked out, waiting to see how low the Dow will go.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
Round of applause, everybody, for the noble art of financial fuckery.
7 points or so. Apple shares are just getting hammered this morning.
Pop quiz. What's the difference between a casino and Wall Street?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe the casinos are at least honest about robbing you.
High five!
Thank you for teaching us that risk is for the little people.
While you get bailed out with our tax money. So, my friends, here's the thing about satire. It kind of stops working when we don't know who the target is anymore. Because, let me show you. Exhibit A, George Bush. Man says a funny sentence. Stumbles over his words. Maybe gets a pair of shoes thrown at him. And we all laugh. Ha ha ha, lol. But Exhibit B, banks. Literally a public building made of cement and windows. There are a bunch of normal workers in there doing their 9 to 5, lost their jobs. We've already got complexity in it to begin with. Remember, nuance is the #1 enemy of satire, so we're already down bad. But let's not give up too soon. Why don't we head up to the upper floors, see who we can target there. Wait, how many of these fuckers were involved in the whole thing? 402? In just America? Jesus Christ. You know what? Screw making jokes about this. It's giving me a headache. Not to mention that in order for these jokes to even land, your audience needs to know what all the financial jargon means. Like, can you tell me with full confidence what collateralized debt obligations are? Leverage ratios. Credit default swaps. Savings account. Even The Big Short, a comedy that satirized the GFC. They were so aware of this that they had to get Margot Robbie, Anthony Bourdain, and Selena Gomez to explain all these terms like we were 5. And I still barely understood half of it. We could put on our tinfoil hats and make an argument that the reason we didn't see an uprising of this systemic political satire in Hollywood is that the media was also complicit in it. But that's getting way off topic. This is supposed to be a video on humor, not media conspiracies. So we'll end this chapter with a question. How do we continue to make jokes when the system feels like one to begin with?
So there's 2 guys that are out in the middle of the desert. One guy gets bit by a snake. Right on the head of his dick.
So absurdist humor was pretty much in full swing by now. No one gave a fuck anymore. Reject order! Embrace chaos! Comedy's new mantra. Tim and Eric were having their moments with their brand of self-aware meta-humor. Eric Andre, as we saw just now, the most unhinged late-night parody show anyone had ever seen. Community and Portlandia were doing the quirky, if you know, you know, self-referential humor and owning it. And movies like Scott Pilgrim were embracing pop culture surrealism. Weird was in. Cartoons joined the party, dialing up the irony. BoJack Horseman, Rick and Morty, both smashing nihilism and humor together, creating a brand of dark humor that you either got or you didn't. Movies were a bit of a mess around this point. Honestly, it was a pretty tricky time for comedy. We got these though, so it wasn't a complete disaster. Right, so if we imagine 2008 to 2014 as this sort of transitionary period for comedy, what was the catalyst that fully sent it into the next phase? A. Culture wars. B. Social media. C. Pharrell buying a new hat. D. All of the above. You got it. All of the above.
This is a bit dramatic. Turns out the Republicans have lost the culture wars.
Society felt like a fucking battlefield, and comedy writers were caught in the crossfire. Social media was well on the rise by now, and it made everything more polarizing. Everything already was polarizing. But now we had platforms, one misconstrued line in a script, and the cast, an entire production team, would be out of a job. Around this time, we started seeing the rise of these sorts of comedies. Ones that were using social issues, gender, identity, class, etc. Key and Peele started a couple of years earlier, but they were the goats in this wave of socially conscious comedy. Funnily enough, horror was actually going through a similar shift. Less cheap scares, more social commentary. I've actually got a whole video about that in case you want to check that out. And then, just as comedy was already struggling to navigate this minefield, blunder number 5. Lockdown made everyday life feel like a broken simulation. Memes had turned into incomprehensible mush. And TikTok humor morphed into the surreal. In hindsight, not really all that surprising, right? Fear, isolation, uncapped internet usage. We were lucky if we still had a job at this point. Shit was rough. It wasn't all doom and gloom though. On the plus side, it finally gave us a chance to dabble in those hobbies that we were putting off. Like we learned how to bake sourdough, maybe picked up the guitar. We even learned how to talk to our plants. Cute, right? And then to unwind at night, we'd put on the telly, and we'd all tune in to the global leaderboard of fucking death. Who thought this was a good idea? Are you stupid? Anyway, trauma became a shared experience. Absurdism locked in, while we locked down for the next few years. Theaters reopened, and absurdism was everything. Everywhere. All at once. Kinda like that movie with the same name. And suddenly everything had to be a multiverse. I think by this point, it kind of felt like comedy had already accepted that the culture wars weren't going away. And with the pandemic screwing cinema in the ass, taking any more risk, forget about it. So absurdism kind of stuck. Obviously nothing as extreme as Eric Andre. He's in a league of his own. More like this sort of level of surreal spice. See, here's what I think might have happened. Comedy had to find a way to be funny without putting targets on anyone specific. And so the humor became vibes-based, situational, laughing with the audience about how everything feels broken, rather than targeting specific people or groups. Except for South Park. Unfucking touchable throughout the ages. Hey, and welcome back to Whose Vibe Is It Anyway? The show where nothing is clear answers and all the points belong to me. Today our topic is the wonderful and colorful world of memes. Memes are one of the cleanest cultural markers of how humor's evolved over time. Exhibit A, Paleolithic comedy. Man chasing bison. Absolute cinema. Exhibit B, pre-internet memes. Basically comics. You know, workplace comedy, observational humor, poking fun at mundane corporate life. Early internet adolescence. Classic top text, bottom text. Super traditional, very formal, accessible to everyone. Not very original, but highly relatable. I was gonna do a separate one for boomer memes, like, you know, these Minions type of crap, but I think they all belong in this category. No need to complicate things. Exhibit D! Culturally coded memes. Think 4chan, 9gag, Pepe the Frog, Trollface. The jokes became layered, ironic, sometimes political, and sometimes downright offensive. Often the joke would only land if you're already in with the group. But here's where it gets dark. Some of these platforms, they weaponized these memes. Users could post extremist content while claiming, oh, it's just a joke, bro. What are you mad about? Why are you mad, bro? It basically became meme psyops 101. You start innocently posting them, and then you think you're being ironic. Ha ha ha, he he he. Then before you know it, you've slipped down the fucking alt-right pipeline, and you've become part of the misogyny brigade. Goes to show, irony can be all fun and games up until some basement dweller decides to weaponize it into hate speech. Be careful out there, kids. Exhibit E, early absurdism. Meanings broken down, punchlines barely exist. No traditional setup. Just weird, nihilistic vibes. Spend long enough on Reddit and you encounter these subreddits that embody this entire philosophy. Exhibit F, brain rot memes. Okay, now we are in the modern age of today. I think we've now officially reached a point where irony is collapsing so hard into itself that it's become a race to the fucking bottom in terms of who can make the most nonsensical thing ever. Like, it's basically the equivalent of... Gotta wonder though, where do you go from here next? So with each generation's memes becoming more and more nonsensical over the ages, it definitely lines up with what we were talking about earlier, right? How absurdism rises to the top when it feels like shit's hitting the fan. Like, I'm not passing any judgment here. Can't really blame Gen Z for embracing this style of humor. Like, why bother trying to make sense when the world feels like a joke to begin with? Gen Z grew up with constant security fears, watching every political conversation turn toxic, and then had their teenage years stolen by a pandemic while watching society tear each other's hair out over the last roll of toilet paper and baby formula. Like, if us millennials were grabbing scraps left from the upper levels, Gen Z is lower down, licking empty plates. It's not looking good for Gen Alpha. So here's my tip for you, future gens. If there's ever a time to reread Albert Camus, it's now.